Hello, my name is Barbara Levin. Welcome. I'm the Executive Director of Neurofibromatosis Mid-Atlantic. We are a 35-year-old nonprofit agency devoted to NF support, awareness, and education. For those of you who don't know, neurofibromatosis is a variable and potentially devastating genetic disorder that causes tumors to grow anywhere on the body. It is often misdiagnosed, and scientific studies show that the most common form of NF occurs in 1 in every 2,500 births. This statistic is much quoted, but it must be noted that given the caveat that if NF was correctly diagnosed, the number could easily escalate to 1 in every 1,000 births for the most common form of NF. Neurofibromatosis has over 500 manifestations, ranging from the relatively minor appearance of cafe au lait spots to extreme pain and death. The heartache of neurofibromatosis is its unpredictability and the isolation that people with NF, as well as those who love and care for them, experience. Hence, we have asked Dr. Marianne Bowman to help us negotiate the profound effect a diagnosis can have on the patient and caregiver. We know how the variable reactions to receiving and then living with the consequences of a lifelong incurable disorder are akin to grief and little understood. Dr. Bowman is here to help us traverse this process. Before we begin, I wanted to take care of some housekeeping items. There is a question pane on the right side of your screen. If you have questions during the presentation, simply type in your question and click Send. At the end of the presentation, we will do a question and answer session and take as many questions as time permits. I will be muting everyone while Dr. Bowman speaks, but feel free to write your questions. This broadcast is being recorded, and I will send you a link of the entire presentation as you are subscribed to the series. Feel free to share it with your family and loved ones. We ask that additional copies be accompanied with a donation to allow us to continue presenting these webinars. I now want to welcome Dr. Marianne Sontag Bowman. Dr. Bowman is Associate Professor in the School of Social Work at the University of Montana at Missoula and has devoted her adult life to the area of bereavement, grief, loss of abilities, and ultimately hope. She has helped so many with her deep understanding of this process, and we are so honored that she joined us yesterday and today. Dr. Bowman.
Hello, and thank you again for having me. And we're going to pick up where we left off yesterday, talking about coping with grief and really focusing on ideas for, all right, what do I do about this? So before we launch into that, let's just do a couple reminders that grief is a reaction to loss, that it's multidimensional, it affects all parts of who we are. It's not linear or orderly, and that when we assume that it is, then we set ourselves up for feeling like we're failing at grief. It's not really possible to fail at your own grief. Grief is more akin to chaos, and the job of grief is just to reorder the chaos and find a new normal. And no, that's not easy, I know. Again, grief is not just emotional. That's what we tend to think about it, is like, oh, I'm sad. But grief also has physical manifestations, social, cognitive, and spiritual. There really is not a part of our life that is not impacted by grief. I want to make the point, especially for today's talk, that any time we experience change, we experience loss. Now, sometimes the change doesn't really mean that much to us. You know, you get up and you realize, oh, I need to change my sheets, so I'm going to have blue ones instead of white ones today. You know, yes, you lost the color of the sheets that you had, but it doesn't really mean very much. So change always involves loss, but the magnitude of a loss has to do with how attached we were to the past thing, the thing that changed. If we really don't care that much what color the sheets are, it doesn't really affect us. But if we are attached to the way it was, then yes, that change will affect us, and we're going to feel that loss much more. But change, even happy changes like getting married, or I suppose even if you won the lottery, you're going to have big changes in your life, and yes, it's going to impact you, and you're going to lose some things. So I want to talk about losses that are associated with change in health status. And I didn't put these in any particular order. I just started listing them, and this is not going to be an exhaustive list, but I think it's important to talk about that. You know, when a person gets a diagnosis, there's, like grief, there's not a place where the impact is not felt. So I'm just going to go through and talk about these. One loss that we're going to have, because it's going to be changes, is in roles. And I think of roles as just our roles in a family. If we were the caretaker of someone, children for example, and now because of our change in health status we're not able to do that, then that's a loss. Or our role could be that we were the PTA president, or we were involved in customer service in our job and we're not able to do that anymore. I mean, if you think about all the roles that each of us has in our lives, you can start to imagine that when health status changes, roles change. And a lot of these things I'm going to talk about overlap each other, and that's okay, because that's how our lives are. Everything is intertwined with everything else. Another thing that can change when there's a health status change is our financial status. And if we can't go to work, if we have to go on disability, that is going to have an impact on our financial status. And my goodness, anything, well, what isn't dependent on our financial status? You know, so lots of things are going to change if our financial status changes, in addition to just our peace of mind about finances. If you are living with a life-threatening or life-changing health status, then you know that control, the loss of control, is a huge issue. There are so many things that you're not in charge of anymore. And it could be as simple as what kind of medicines you have to take. It could be as much as you don't have the ability to drive yourself to appointments anymore. You don't get to be in charge of how your body works. I mean, there are so many ways that health status changes impact our ability to control our world. I don't know that there isn't a place that's not impacted, that our ability to manage things isn't impacted. Employment is another one. Sometimes people, either because they have to go on disability or they just can't do their normal jobs, have changes of employment. And a lot of us derive so many things, not just money, from our employment. So could be that, you know, go back to the loss of roles. You know, if a job helps us feel competent and successful, losing that means that we lose those things as well. And employment's related to financial status, it's related to control. I mean, again, everything is intertwined. But people that experience health status changes often have changes in employment, and it could be short-term or it could be permanent. You know, one of the other things to think about is that our employment frequently puts us in contact with our support system. Many people derive a lot of support, and if you spend 9 or 10 hours a day with people, they become your friends, your support system. And losing that, losing the support system that goes along with employment, is really hard. You know, as I talk about these things, I hope that you are thinking about people that you know or even yourself that have experienced health status changes, and maybe you've never considered before all these different things that happen when someone has a health status change. Mobility is another one that gets changed. People don't, and not just like the ability to get up and walk around, but the ability to get up and walk around comfortably, or the ability to get in a car and drive somewhere, or the ability to use your fingers in a way that you've always done it. Mobility is not just my ability to walk places. It's so many more things. And when that changes, again, it's like throwing a pebble in a pond. You change your mobility and it impacts your roles, it impacts your financial status, it impacts your ability to control things, and it can impact your employment. Energy. Energy is one that, again, impacts everything else. But when you're sick, when you have to take certain medicines, when you're impacted by certain conditions, you're not going to have the same amount of energy to do your normal things. And it's depressing to feel tired all the time. When I worked at hospice, people would tell me they were sick and tired of feeling sick and tired. And that happens. I want my energy back. I want to feel okay again. And it's a big loss when you suddenly don't have the usual energy that you had before, whether it's because of medication, whether it's because of your illness. And the other thing about energy that I think of is not just physical energy, but emotional energy. Sometimes when you are dealing with hard stuff, you really just don't have the emotional energy. You don't. And you know how I think of it is, I think in terms of little soldiers. I imagine that all of us have about 100 little soldiers to manage our daily life. And when you use 90 of them to deal with a chronic illness, they are not available for anything else. So that leaves you 10 to do everything else. And that's not very many. And it can be really hard and depressing to not be able to do the things we normally do. So the next one, hobbies. Again, like employment, a lot of us have hobbies that help define who we are. They give us a lot of enjoyment. And if your hobby is hiking up to the top of mountains and all of a sudden your mobility is gone, then you've lost not only your ability, but you've lost the ability to do something that you really love. And that's another loss. I hope you're seeing that when we're talking about loss of health status, we're talking about a cascading effect of losses, like loss after loss after loss. And it's no wonder that people that live with a chronic illness also live with chronic sorrow oftentimes. Other losses associated with changes in health status. Of course, health. I mean, health is, we don't even think about it. We don't even typically think about, I'm healthy, until we're not. And that's a big loss. Loss of functioning. Again, all of these things are interrelated. The ability to function in all kinds of ways, whether it's a functioning, being your digestive system is working well, functioning in terms of being able to perform your roles, be able to do your hobbies, functioning just in terms of being able to cope, because sometimes there's so many sad, bad things that are happening that you just can't function. You're like, done, I'm done, I can't do anymore. And that's a loss. The ability to just stay on top of life and everything it requires, huge loss. Relationships change. There's no question about that. Some people, and we have to be understanding, I suppose, some people just don't handle chronic health problems very well, and other people, they don't know what to say, they don't know what to do, they don't know, they have no idea how you relate to somebody who is hurting, and so they stay away, or they say really unfortunate things. Other people will step up. They're really good when someone's in a crisis, but not everyone is. And I guess I like to think about, well, I don't know what that person's history is, and I don't know, maybe they're filled up already. Maybe they are dealing with hard things themselves, or this is bringing back things for them that are really difficult. I don't know their story, so I try to be understanding. But yes, it's very hurtful when people don't step up to the plate when we need them. Another loss associated with a change in health status is autonomy, and that, oh my gosh, so many ways we lose our freedom. We can't just do all the things that we used to do. We may have appointments we have to go to. It may be that we literally can't help ourselves go to the bathroom anymore. It might be that I can't make my meals anymore. I can't go to the grocery store. And it's not just that we have physical limitations that prevent that. We might just not have the emotional energy to do all the things that we used to do. And that's normal, it's expected, but it does mean that we've lost some freedoms that we used to have, and that's hard, really hard. I think one that's really maybe we don't think about enough is that when we have health issues, we lose hopes and dreams. When we had an idea of the way things were going to go, and all of a sudden there's a big stop sign with a big detour, and I didn't want to go that direction. That's not where I was going, and I don't want to go this way. And so all the things that we planned out, all the places we're going to visit, all the things we're going to do, it all has to change. And that's sad. It's sad to realize, okay, I'm never going to do that now. I'm not going to do this. I always dreamed of that. I'm not going to have children. I'm not going to whatever. That's hard. I have a son with type 1 diabetes, and yeah, there are a lot worse things. But it's also really sad to sort of think about, now my son has lost the ability to just have peace of mind. He has to worry all the time about what he eats. He has to make sure his insulin pump's working. Floating on the river here in Montana, which we like to do, is difficult when you have a $10,000 insulin pump attached to you that can't get wet. So just things like that you have to change, and it's okay to be sad about those things. It's not like you can't also be happy. Gee, I'm glad, okay, at least it's not whatever. But it is okay to acknowledge that, yeah, my life looks different now, and I'm sad for the life that I had hoped to have. Identity is another one that we can lose when we have a change in health status. Again, we have this image of ourselves in a certain way, and when we get a chronic illness or a life-changing diagnosis, we're different, and we didn't ask to be different, and we kind of maybe liked how we were before, and we didn't really want this new role, new identity, but there you are, and that's hard, and that's loss. And for some people who have some diagnoses, you lose your life. And I don't just mean life in terms of everything that's changed in a life. I mean that sometimes people are faced with the loss of their life, that their diagnosis is so bad that they are going to have to confront the reality sooner than the rest of us that their life is limited. And that is a huge loss for all kinds of reasons, of course. Those of you who love someone who's had a health status change, I hope you'll think about this. And this is not an exhaustive list that I've come up with, and everybody's life is different, so everybody's losses are different. But just remember that when there's a change, there is a loss, and losses that matter result in grief. And I think one of the things about a health status change is that it's often a hidden loss. And so people don't see it. It's not like we wear a sign on us that says, I hurt all the time, you know, or I had to go on disability. And that's not always obvious. And so we don't get the level of support, social support, that somebody might get if we're wearing a cast on their leg, for example. And I think that's hard too. You would like to hope that people will be kinder if they know that we are wounded, but with many health status changes, people don't know that we're wounded, and so they don't know that we need extra support. We need people to be gentle with us, and that, I think that's hard too. That's another hard part of a diagnosis. I want to talk a little bit about how I can help others. In other words, if you're a loved one of somebody who's dealing with a really difficult diagnosis and is struggling with grief associated with the loss and change, how can you help? You know, I get that question a lot, like how can I help? And this sounds really paradoxical, but I think it's true, is that we have to understand that the only thing that's going to fix the problem is not possible. You know, sometimes people think, okay, well, I got to say just the right thing, or if I just do this, they'll feel better. And, you know, there are some things that they can't be fixed. I mean, if you have the magic wand, yay, then yes, you can fix it. But until the magic wand shows up, and I have a big long line of people who need it, so if you have it, please send it my way. But until we find that magic wand, there are so many things we can't fix. And when we stop trying, that's better. Because what happens is people will try to point out, okay, well, yes, I'm sorry the person died, but hey, at least they had a really good life. Like, that makes me feel better? No, it doesn't. You know, just stop with the I'm sorry part. But people are trying to make us feel better and try to make it better. And some things just cannot be made better. Like, you can't really tell someone who's had an unfortunate diagnosis, well, at least you didn't get X. In fact, I should have known better, but when I was driving my 16-year-old home from the hospital after he got his diagnosis and spent 3 days in a hospital with his diabetes, I said to him, well, at least it's not, you know, cancer. It could have been worse. And he just looked at me and said, I'll never forget this. It could have been better. And I thought, oh, that was a really stupid thing I just said, because it was minimizing. And exactly, it can always be worse. It can always be better. But it doesn't really matter, because when you're in the moment and you're trying to deal with what you've been dealt, that's it. You're dealing with it. You don't need people to try to cheer you up about it. It is what it is. So I think when we want to help people, that's the big one for me, is just don't try to fix it. And avoid platitudes. Platitudes are those really dumb things that we say, like I just did. Just gave you that example of what I said to my son. Nobody's perfect. And we want to avoid platitudes, because they're really, I don't know who we think we're helping when we say stuff like that. So the worst one that I had was worked with a family whose teenage son died, and someone said to them, well, think of the money you'll save by not having to send him to college. It's like, oh, people. You know, the person was not trying to be mean. It was just one of those things where I don't know what to say. Let's look on the bright side. Okay, sometimes there is no bright side. That's the take-home message. There's no bright side. And if there is a bright side, it's not our job to tell other people what their bright side is. Everyone gets to figure that out for themselves. So platitudes like, well, God doesn't give you more than you can bear, or well, you know, it could be worse. And, those things are not helpful to people, so we should avoid them. It can be really helpful to educate and normalize for people. So if someone says to me, oh my gosh, I don't even know how I'm going to be able to handle this, I am so devastated, it's fine to say, of course you're devastated. Who wouldn't be devastated? You know, and in that way you're educating and normalizing for the person, which can be so helpful, because like we talked about yesterday, it's worse when you think you're losing it and going crazy, or like you're doing it wrong. No, it's like, I'm angry that this is happening. And then you say, of course you're angry. Who wouldn't be angry? There's so much to be angry about. In that way, you are normalizing, and then you are educating, and that can be very helpful. I think it's really important to be genuine. Don't say things you don't mean. Don't overstate things. Just be who you are and let your caring heart show. People can tell if we're being fake, and that's not helpful. And if you need to cry with someone, get the Kleenex and cry. Just be who you are and speak from your heart, and usually that's very helpful. Unless you're genuinely not a nice person, in which case it's best to avoid people who need nice people in their lives. But most of us are not mean, and so be your genuine nice self and supportive. Provide support to people. And you know, the thing, I just heard this, someone said, well, the golden rule is do unto others as you would have them do unto you, but the platinum rule is do unto others as they would like have done. And I think that's a really good way to think about providing support. Think about not, oh, well, what would be supportive for me? Think about what would be supportive for them. So while you may think, you know, what'd be really supportive for me is if somebody sent me, you know, like a coupon for free pizza. Well, if the person doesn't like pizza, that's not very supportive. So really important to think about, what does this person think is supportive? And provide that, not what you think would be supportive. Not, you don't want to say, well, I would like it if everyone would leave me alone. Well, that may not be what the other person needs. So important to know what it is that the other person needs and provide that. And then I think what's really important is to remember that providing support and being genuine and just being thoughtful to somebody who has had something bad happen isn't a one-time thing. They're living with it every single day for months and months and years. Don't forget. Like if someone has had a death, I say, send them a card on the anniversary. Let them know that you have not forgotten that this has happened to them. It is really hard when you think everyone else is back to their normal lives. I'll never have a normal life again, and nobody cares. So don't forget, and don't be afraid to bring it up. You know, sometimes people will say, well, I don't want to bring it up. It'll make them upset and remind them. It's like, you don't think they're thinking about it all the time? Of course they are. So even if you just said, I just want you to know I'm thinking of you, and I know this has to be so hard, and I want you to know I haven't forgotten that you're dealing with a hard thing. How can we help ourselves? So if you're a person who's dealing with a difficult diagnosis, and of course you're sad, of course you've had changes, and of course you've had losses, and it's hard. So what can you do to help yourself? I think one of the most important things we can do is to just be aware of what is normal. Have knowledge about, oh, well, this is, of course I feel terrible. You know, just know what's normal. Know what normal grief is. Know what's normal for your condition. Just don't have unrealistic expectations of yourself. And one of the best ways to avoid that is just to know what is normal. Expression can be very helpful, and that could be in many ways. It could be talking to people that you love. It could be seeing a counselor or a therapist. It could be writing in a journal. It could be making videos. So many ways. But when everything is stuck inside of your head, it can just make you want to explode. And so expressing it in whatever way, art, music, hiking, exercise, whatever it is, that can be very helpful. Patience. super, super important. You need to remember that you can't do everything that you used to be able to do, and that you don't feel like you used to. And you have to be patient with yourself about that, and patient with the process. Hopefully you'll feel better again, but maybe not today. And just being patient with the limitations you have, being patient with other people. Patience is just a virtue I think all of us could probably practice a lot more. Whatever you're going through right now is not the first awful thing that's happened to you. Unless you have a really magical life, something bad has happened to you before. And we can learn from those things. So when you are dealing with a difficult thing right now, look back and say to yourself, all right, what helped me when I went through that other bad thing? What are the things that I did that made a difference, that made it easier for me? And then do those things. Past can be really informative. Remember to take it a day at a time, and this is a lot like patience, but some of these people will say to me, oh my gosh, I cannot live the rest of my life like this. And I say, you're right, because you don't get to live the rest of your life right now. You only have to live right now. You just have to live in this minute. You don't know what's going to happen in the future. So just live today. Don't borrow trouble in the future. If we project out, oh my gosh, I have to live like this for the rest of my life, you can't do that today anyway. All you can do is just live today, in today's moment. And so try to focus on that. When I had a friend who's a psychiatrist give me a really good idea once, that if you find yourself ruminating about, oh my gosh, I can't do this forever, or whatever it is that's going on in your head that's making you down, just imagine a big red stop sign, a thought-stopping stop sign. So stop. When you start to, oh, I cannot live like this for the rest of my life, and you start imagining the future as if you're able to predict it, imagine the big red stop sign and refocus on, you know what, I can't live that way. I can only live today. Let other people help. And when they say, what can I do to help? Hand them a list. So make a list in advance of things that would be very helpful. Go shopping, mow my lawn, take my dog for a walk, bake me chocolate chip cookies. People really, really want to help, or they wouldn't ask. They really do, but they don't know what to do because they don't know what it is you need. So make a list and hand it to them. Ask people for help. They want to help. Give them an opportunity to feel good about being helpful. So just let other people help, even if it's listening. Listening's huge. Don't forget to get enough sleep and eat properly. That makes a huge difference as well. And avoiding alcohol. Alcohol is a depressant, and so when we drink alcohol, it does not help us feel happy. And if you can't feel happy, you for sure don't want to be all depressed, more than perhaps you already are. So alcohol is a good thing to avoid. Another thing that can help is sticking to a routine. All of us feel better when we have a routine, when we know what to expect. We can count on these things happening. When you've had a change in health status, there are so many things that are now out of your control. But what is within your control is what you do and when during your day. So even if it's something like, at 10 o'clock, I am having tea. Okay, then make sure you do that. Routine is particularly important for children. If children are affected by grief, by life changes, helping them stay in a routine really, really important. But we're all just tall children, and so routine helps all of us. And it can be 3 or 4 things a day that you do at the same time. But having a routine really can make us feel like, okay, I have this under control. When you've had something bad happen, you've gotten a bad diagnosis, you've had a flare-up, it's not the time to make major decisions. It's not the time to say, all right, that's it. I'm giving away all my belongings. I'm getting a divorce. I'm whatever, you know. I'll never drive again. I'm selling my car. No, don't, just calm down. Don't make any major decisions. Just sit tight and wait until this big wave hits you and goes over. It'll settle down again, and then you can make the decisions. But really try hard not to have to make any major decisions when you're in the middle of a health crisis. And then what I think I see a lot is people not understanding that they need to dial back. Let's go back to the 100 little soldiers again. You have 100 little soldiers to manage everything in your life. You can't make more. You only have 100. And so when the 90 are dispatched to handle the health crisis, you simply don't have enough for all the usual things in your life. Another way to think of it is like a sponge. If the sponge is saturated, not one more drop can go in. And I think this is what people, I don't want to say do wrong because it's their life, but this is where I see people get tripped up, is that they don't realize that their life is already full. It's like there's no space for extra stuff. And so when you get a health thing that happens, or some other form of change that results in grief, it has to get crammed into an already full life. And like we talked about yesterday with the picture frame, it's going to fill up the space. Well, that means there's not room for other stuff. And so instead of feeling guilty about, oh my gosh, I forgot to do that, oh shoot, I didn't do that, just dial it back. Just say to yourself, you know what, I just can't. So, delegate. It's like, I can't take my kid to the Little League game. All right, find someone who can. Instead of trying to do everything, which you will not be able to do, so it's just a setup, just dial it all back and just say, uh-oh, I only have 10 little soldiers to do the work of 100, so which things of my life can go? And let them go. And don't feel bad about it, because it's probably, well, it might be forever, but it might not be. And you physically can't, emotionally can't, and it's okay. We're all like that. It's not just you. None of us can do more than we can. And when you have a big health status thing, you're full. You're full. There's no space. And then this sounds funny, but there's always good things to focus on. You can always find something that that is a reason to feel positive, even if it's that, you know what, I didn't ask for this, I didn't want it, but oh my gosh, it's made me a better person. Or, oh look, my neighbor came over with cookies, I just really appreciate that. There is really good evidence that keeping gratitude journals actually can make us feel happier. So thinking of the things you feel grateful for, writing them down when everything else seems awful, that can be really helpful. And I don't know anyone that has had something so awful happen to them that cannot also find that there is something positive still, that there is not joy left. I mean, none of us are left without joy. Isn't life always a matter of the balance between sorrow and joy? And we can choose to always focus on the sorrow, or we can focus on the joy as well, and to be willing to look at that. And I think that really does help, and it just makes us feel better when we can say, okay, well, I still have this. I've lost these things, but you know what, I still have this. And it can be whatever it is that makes you happy, even if it's a small thing. So, this, again, not an exhaustive list and not going to work for everyone, but hopefully just some of these ideas will get you thinking, and for yourself and for other people. And I think maybe the most important thing is to never let go of hope. Like, there's always things to hope for. So never let that go. And that helps. Just being able to look forward to something, to knowing that there's still hope. There always is. And we're all different about what we hope for, but that's something to work towards, figuring out what can I hope for. So those are my ideas for that, and I welcome your questions.
Well, once again, thank you. And I forgot to mention to everyone who is listening, you will be given a copy of both today and yesterday's webinar. And although they can easily be separated out, they are particularly valuable to listen to together. And Dr. Bowman, once again, that was wonderful. But I wanted to talk about a couple things. One is a big issue, and it's loneliness.
Uh-huh.
And I want to talk not only about the loneliness of the person affected, but the loneliness of if they're lucky enough to have a caregiver, or if they happen to have a caregiver, that kind of loneliness, it appears to be in conflict. Am I wrong about that?
In conflict with?
The loneliness that each feels appears to be in conflict.
Yeah, two aspects of that. So loneliness when we don't have a caregiver, we are by ourselves, and loneliness when you're in a relationship and everything's changed and the other person is consumed by all of their own issues and the connections are lost. So first, if we're on our own and we're lonely because we've lost so many things, we don't have the same social connections, I think it's really important, we're humans, we're human social beings, to force ourselves to find ways to connect with people. If that's on an online chat, if that's calling a helpline, if that's being willing to invite your neighbor that you haven't really met over for coffee, just making ourselves connect with another person is very helpful. And sometimes, though, we're so down in the dumps, we're so depressed that the idea of doing that is just impossible. And what I would say to that is you don't have to throw a party. Just one baby step towards another person. Just even if it's to call a long-lost relative or join a new group that's online or go for a walk, borrow someone's dog. I mean, just some way to connect. Again, not a huge giant thing all at once, and you don't have to say, all right, I'm going to start, square dancing every week for the next 10 years. No, just today. I'm going to walk to the park and sit on a bench next to someone and talk to them for 5 minutes. And what we find is that if you just do one small change, it will change everything. And then when partners are together and there's a diagnosis, and it's really normal when you've had a health status change to be consumed by that because there's so much to it that you're just so, it's like all your energy is directed inside because you're trying to cope and you're trying to figure it all out. And so there's not a lot of energy left for other people, and that can cause partners to feel isolated and lonely as well. What can help in that is to really be open about that, and for partners, not in the heat of a moment, but with compassion and understanding for one person, and again, one small change will change everything, one person to look at the other person and simply say, I miss you. Could we have coffee? Could we go walk together? Can we, just one small thing, but just putting it out in the open, not as, you never pay any attention to me, you're always involved with your own stuff, that's all you care about. That's not helpful. But to just say, I miss you. I miss you, and I'm sad for you, and I'm sad for the changes in our relationship, and how about if we just go to a movie or share something, and just reaching out like that, because it is a health status change causes, you have to go on a new path together. Someone's got to take the first step. But acknowledging the loneliness, I think, is the first step. And then you can start building back connections.
That's very lovely. In the same vein, there is something when a health status change provokes sometimes, you talked about this a little, that there are, you start losing people, sometimes you gain some new ones, but
Right.
Inevitably there appears to be a certain level of support fatigue. I always liken it to when someone is in the hospital and it's a novelty. When they're there too long,
Right.
It's as if the staff doesn't care about them anymore,
Yeah.
or they're just not getting as much attention. What
Right.
how
Right.
can you help us with some of those some strategies to help at least not alleviate it, but at least comfort people in that situation?
Yeah, and when I talked about how we can help others, and one of the ways is to not forget, that's what I mean is that normal life doesn't go on for everyone, and we should acknowledge that. So if we're somebody that loves someone who's dealing with a health concern, we have to make the effort not to forget that they're dealing with that, and we have to reach out. And if we're the person who's feeling like, where, where are my friends? Where are the nurses? Where is my support system? There are a couple things that occur to me. One is, I think it's really important to be self-aware and to say, do I maybe need to not only talk about my health problems? Are there things I need to do different? Do I need to maybe direct some of my energy in other directions towards other people as well? I think that gets part of it. And that's important. And we might answer ourselves and say, no, I'm not. I don't think I'm doing that. But the other thing is to also recognize that sometimes people don't want to bother us, and so we might have to make the effort to invite people over, to invite the connections. They might think, often people, I don't want to bother the person. Okay, well then we can extend a hand and hope that people will connect. So I think we have to pay attention to, have I gotten too narrow, and am I not being a good friend because I'm only focused on myself and my own needs? Important to think that way. And if I decide, okay, no, I don't think that's it, maybe it's that our family and friends don't want to bother us, and I need to let them know that I would love to see them and I would love to do things with them. And there's nothing wrong with reaching out. And I think being mad at people for not meeting our needs is a choice. Like I think we can choose not to, because I think being mad at people is not very conducive to having connections with them, because most people don't like to connect with angry people. So I think we can make a choice. Okay, I'm not going to take it personal. I'm not going to be mad. I'm just going to try to build some bridges.
Mm-hmm.
Not make it other people's responsibility all the time. Sometimes we are lonely and there isn't anybody to come. And in that case, that's the time to start trying to make new connections, new friends, in whatever way is available to us, and asking for help, for ideas.
Thank you. That's particularly relevant to a question we did just get in, and which might have a certain it has a certain poignancy to people with NF, because oftentimes people with NF, because their differences are physical,
Yeah.
that they oftentimes have to deal with rebuff, as our questioner suggested, or I always call it isolation, or and sometimes just this need not to be seen. People don't want to look at someone who they might consider disfigured.
Yeah.
And do you have any suggestions on that? I know I'm asking a lot.
Yeah. No, oh my gosh, of course. If we believe that other people are rebuffing us because we are disfigured, there's a couple things there, many things there, but a couple that come to my mind right away. It's possible that that's our thoughts, that we are so disturbed by our changes in physical appearance that we imagine that other people are also as horrified as we are that these things have happened to us. It's possible that they are not. And I think that's important to remember, is that it is possible that we are the ones that are expressing that and feeling that, and that other people don't share that. It's also possible that some people do share that they are distressed by the physical disfigurements, and that's difficult. There are a couple things. The internet makes connection with people and support without being physically present possible. And so I would encourage that. Is there a support group? Can you have email chats with people? In what way can you connect using the internet? Because that definitely, it can be a huge support.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is that it's okay for people to have the reactions that they do, and they'll probably get past them. And that's something that we can do, is that we can say, okay, yes, some people are going to be, they are going to be distressed by my appearance, and other people will not. I need to find the people who will not and connect with them and worry less about the people who will be distressed. I mean, that's easy for me to say, I know, and that's probably what you're thinking, but that's what comes to my mind, is that there are really wonderful people out there, and they will embrace you no matter what you look like. Those are the people to find.
Thank you. There are two things. I'd love to end this on a hopeful note, because you have ended on a hopeful note, but there is one question that has come in through a variety of ways, and I think that you would be perfect to answer it. We have been asked many times about some strategies for talking to your child who gets a disability. I mean, how much do you tell them? Do you tell them everything? Do you tell them the chances? And then that provokes this other question of the other people in the family.
So
perhaps that's too much.
Well, if the child has the diagnosis, or if the adult does?
Well, we were thinking of child. That was
okay.
But
yeah,
certainly answer it both ways.
Okay, so anytime you're dealing with kids, it is critical to understand normal development, that children just don't get things the same way adults do. So a 6-year-old is going to understand things in a very different way than even a 12-year-old. And so our explanations to children should always be in the context of their normal development. And if we don't understand normal development, then we just need to do some reading about it. But like, for example, I worked with a kid who was about 5 or 6, and he said to me, his brother had died. My brother lives in the dirt with Jesus. And he said that in a very nonchalant, matter-of-fact way. And I was trying to figure out, why does he think his brother lives in the dirt with Jesus? And it was because everyone was telling him his brother was with Jesus, but he knew his brother had been buried. So therefore, Jesus must live in the dirt at the cemetery with his brother. And it's just a great illustration of how kids don't get things the same way we do. And so if a child comes up with a life-altering diagnosis, you tell them the truth, and know that they aren't going to get it in the same way. So if you say to somebody, all right, you say to a child, you have this disease, and this is what's going to happen. Well, they don't think beyond basically today. It's like, okay, well, does this mean I can't play baseball? Well, no. Okay, great. Now, do they need to know all the possibilities for the rest of their life? No, kids live in the moment, and especially school-age children and younger. Now, teenagers, when they get a diagnosis, or they've had a diagnosis and now they're a teenager, their normal development means that they understand it in some new ways, which means they are going to experience it in new ways. And a lot of times people don't get that. They're like, the kids had lived with this for their whole life, and now all of a sudden it's a big deal. Yep, that's because their mind opened up and saw the whole thing in new ways. And so a child with a life-altering diagnosis has to get educated about it throughout their life and in different ways depending on normal development. But I am a huge advocate of just be honest with the kid, but they don't need to know everything. If they're 7, they don't need to know the implications for their future marital partners or whether they can have children or not. They don't care about that at 7. Teenager is going to. So again, normal, you got to know about normal development, and you tailor your explanations to that.
That's great. That's a perfect answer. Thank you. Before I end, because I really do want to end this on a hopeful note, and we do have to get off, but I'm wondering, Dr. Bowman, even though you said it yesterday, if you would once again give the frame example, just because it's so poignant.
Well, and you know, I alluded to that earlier as well, that the idea that when you receive bad news, whatever it is, a health change, a death has happened, it fills up all the spaces of your life, like a picture frame. If you imagine in the picture frame, it's there. So if you get, say, a cancer diagnosis, if you imagine the picture frame of your life has one big giant word, cancer, and everything else is black. But with time, you start to be able to fill in the spaces again with other things. And I have yet to meet somebody or work with someone, with all the people that I've been involved with, who this is not true. And so that to me gives hope. So if you've gotten bad news, something really bad has happened, yes, right now it's overwhelming. There is no space in your heart or in your mind for anything else. It feels dreary, it feels awful, it's despairing, it's overwhelming. It won't always feel that way. And gradually, the giant word with whatever it is starts to get smaller and smaller, and other things come back in your life. Some of them are the old things, some of them are new things that you don't even know about yet that are wonderful. And then over time, a lot of tears, the picture frame becomes filled with your life again, and there's just a little word in the corner for whatever has happened, and it stays there forever. And that's okay. It should, because it was a really big part of your life. But it absolutely gets better, and that's why I always like to remind people that, yes, there's hope. There is hope. It will get better. It won't stay the same, that's for sure. If you think back on your life, what has ever stayed the same? So you can count on change for sure.
Well, thank you. On behalf of everyone here, I want to thank Dr. Marianne Bowman, and we also want to thank those of you listening now and those of you who will listen in the future. We want to thank you for joining us. Again, within the next week, I'll be sending a link to this complete session and yesterday's session to the email you provided, so you can view it again or share it with your loved ones if you wish. We will also try to check in with you via our website, www.nfmidatlantic.org, as well as email blasts. We will follow up on any resources that might help you during this process. Those will be on our website as well. NF Mid-Atlantic provides free communication with patient support advocates, by the way. These are people who share an NF diagnosis and are available to share your thoughts and feelings. They do not give medical advice, but more so serve as sympathetic ears if you feel you need that. And just feel free to contact me about that service. Our next webinar, and please save the date, will be October 3rd, 2013, and in the same vein, it is on how illness and or disability in a family affects marital and family relationships. You'll be getting a registration link via email. Thank you so much again for your participation, and to Dr. Marianne Bowman. Thank you all, and goodbye.
Thank you.